A voice came through the radio, distorted, faint, desperate. "We must be over you, but we cannot see you. Fuel is running low." On the other side, the crew of a Coast Guard ship tried everything. They changed frequencies. They repeated their position. They sent signals. No response. Outside, calm ocean. No smoke, no wreckage, no sound. Just water and horizon and silence. The most famous female pilot in the world had vanished. And almost 90 years later, nobody has fully explained what happened to her. This is the story of Amelia Earhart. Stay with me. Because the further you go into this story, the stranger it gets. To understand why her disappearance shook the entire world, you first need to understand who she was. In the 1930s, Amelia Earhart was not just a pilot. She was a symbol. Her name meant freedom, courage, and the idea that women could do anything that men could do, and sometimes do it better. She had been obsessed with flying since she was young, and every challenge she took on pushed the limits of what anyone thought was possible. In 1928, she crossed the Atlantic Ocean for the first time as a passenger. But that was not enough for her. She wanted to do it alone. 4 years later, in 1932, she did exactly that. 14 hours of flying, alone, crossing the Atlantic from west to east. She became the first woman to do it solo, and only the second person in history after Charles Lindbergh. In 1935, she flew from Hawaii to California, alone, over open ocean, in the dark. Each flight seemed more impossible than the last, and by 1936, Amelia felt there was only one challenge left: to fly around the entire world, following the line of the equator. She gathered sponsors. She chose her navigator, a man named Fred Noonan, one of the most experienced navigators in the world, and she acquired a Lockheed Electra 10E, a silver aircraft modified to carry extra fuel. The route was enormous, 46,000 kilometers, more than 30 stages, 3 oceans to cross. The first attempt began in March of 1937. Everything went well until Hawaii, but when they tried to take off toward Howland Island, a tiny dot in the middle of the Pacific, the plane lost control on the runway. A wheel failed, the propellers bent, the aircraft was destroyed, nobody was injured. But the plane had to be shipped back to California for repairs. During those months, Amelia made a decision that would later matter more than anyone realized. She reversed the route. Instead of crossing the Pacific first, she would now cross the Atlantic and leave the Pacific for the very end. On the 1st of June, 1937, Amelia and Fred took off from Miami. They crossed South America. They flew over the South Atlantic, through Africa, Arabia, and India. They reached Australia, and then lay in New Guinea, a small colonial port surrounded by jungle, heat, and humidity. They were exhausted. They had already traveled more than 35,000 kilometers. Only about 11,000 remained to complete the journey around the world. And now came the most dangerous part. The next stop was Howland Island, 4,000 kilometers away, a piece of flat land barely 2 kilometers long, sitting alone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Finding it from the air was like trying to find a single coin on the floor of a swimming pool while flying at full speed. The margin for error was almost nothing, and if they missed it, the fuel would run out before they found anything else. Amelia spent that night preparing the flight. She barely slept. Early in the morning of the 2nd of July, the Electra disappeared into the sky. The weather report was not good. Clouds, rain, wind. During the first hours, the plane held its altitude and direction. At 7:20 in the morning, Amelia radioed her position. They were about 232 kilometers southwest of the Nukumanu Islands. That was the last confirmed position of the flight. After that, the Pacific became an infinite void. 3 ships had been positioned to help her. The Itasca, a Coast Guard vessel, was waiting near Howland Island. It would send smoke signals to help her see the island from the air. The Ontario was positioned halfway along the route. The Swan was placed between Howland and Hawaii. But something was going wrong with the radio. Amelia had made a technical mistake before the flight. When planning the communications, an expert had recommended a frequency of 750, meaning 750 meters, which equals 400 kilohertz. But Amelia misunderstood. She requested the signal to be sent on 7,500 kilohertz instead. Nobody corrected her. And at those higher frequencies, radio signals are much more likely to break up and distort, which means Amelia probably never clearly heard what the Itasca was sending her. Hours passed. Fuel dropped. Tension grew. The crew of the Itasca could hear her voice, brief cuts, incomplete phrases, but they could not make her hear them. At 7:30 in the evening, her voice came through clearly for the last time. "We must be over you, but we cannot see you. Fuel is running low." At 8:14, one final transmission. Line 157-337. A reference to the navigation line they were following. Then, silence. The next morning, the 3rd of July, 1937, the United States knew what had happened. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan had not reached Howland Island. They had disappeared somewhere over the Central Pacific. Within hours, President Franklin D. Roosevelt gave the order. Begin the largest aerial and naval search operation in history. 9 ships, 66 aircraft, more than 4,000 men, a budget of $4 million, equivalent to about $87 million today. The USS Colorado launched with 3 seaplanes ready to fly. The USS Lexington aircraft carrier departed from San Diego, escorted by destroyers. Pilots flew low over the ocean searching for any sign. A fuel slick, a floating board, a raft, a piece of metal. Every hour that passed reduced the hope. On the 18th of July, 1937, after more than 2 weeks of operations, the United States Navy officially suspended the search. On the 5th of January, 1939, a court declared Amelia Earhart officially dead. No body, no aircraft, no wreckage, just nothing. The official explanation is simple. She ran out of fuel. The plane went down somewhere in the Pacific. The ocean took everything. But there is another possibility, one that changes the entire story. What if Amelia did not crash into the ocean? What if she landed? Here is what could have happened. Amelia cannot find Howland Island. The fuel is almost gone. The sun is rising. The horizon is empty. Fred Noonan draws a line on his navigation chart, line 157-337. If you follow that line south, it passes directly over a small island called Nikumaroro. At the time, it was known as Gardner Island, about 650 kilometers southeast of Howland. It was their last option. Amelia turned the plane. She flew with the last liters of fuel. And then, land appeared. Not Howland, but something. She descended. She landed on the reef. She and Fred survived. For a few hours, the plane remained intact. But when the tide rose, the waves hit hard. The fuselage moved, cracked, slowly sank. Amelia and Fred escaped, but the Electra disappeared beneath the water. Now they were alone. No radio, no food, no fresh water, with no way of knowing if anyone was coming. They survived on coconuts, seabirds, and rainwater. They built a shelter under the trees. 3 years later, in October of 1940, a British officer named Gerald Gallagher landed on the island to inspect it. In a remote spot, hidden between dry bushes, he found human bones, 13 pieces, a skull, arms, legs, and next to them, a shoe heel that appeared to belong to a woman. He sent the bones to Fiji, where a doctor examined them. The conclusion at the time, a European man of medium build. The case was filed away. The world was at war. The bones were eventually lost. Decades later, everything changed. In 2018, forensic anthropologist Richard Jantz reanalyzed the measurements from that 1941 examination. His conclusion was different. The measurements were consistent with Amelia Earhart. The news traveled around the world. But not everyone was convinced. The original doctor had no reason to make an error about the sex. And the most important proof, a serial number, a piece of identified aircraft, a DNA sample, was still missing. A group called TIGAR had been organizing expeditions to Nikumaroro since 1989. They returned in 2001, 2007, 2010, 2012. Each time they brought metal detectors, cameras, and scientific equipment. They found fragments of aluminum, pieces of glass. A broken jar opened with a sharp stone. One fragment appeared to match a window from the Electra. There were too many coincidences to completely ignore, but there was never enough to confirm. In 2017, the History Channel presented a photograph found in the United States National Archives. It showed a dock in the Marshall Islands, a woman with short hair sitting with her back to the camera, a tall man standing beside her. In the background, a ship towing a large object. The woman's posture, the short hair, the build. It looked like Amelia. The man could have been Noonan. The theory behind the photograph went like this. The Electra did not fall near Howland. It drifted too far north into restricted territory. In 1937, Japan controlled large areas of the Western Pacific, the Marshall Islands, the Caroline Islands, the Marianas, strategic zones full of secret military bases. Amelia and Fred managed to make an emergency landing. They were alive, exhausted, wet, lost, but alive. Japanese soldiers found them, took them by boat to a military ship. From there, they were moved to Jaluit and then to Saipan, where Japan had major military installations. There, they were interrogated as possible spies. Two versions of what happened next exist. The first says that Amelia and Fred were eventually executed. When American troops invaded Saipan in 1944, several soldiers reported hearing stories about an American female pilot who had been imprisoned there years before. Some local residents also claimed to have seen a white woman in the custody of Japanese soldiers, but there were no documents, no records, no confirmed names. The second version is more dramatic. Amelia survived. The United States negotiated her release in secret and brought her home under a new identity. A woman named Irene Craigmile Bolam was, according to some, actually Amelia Earhart living in hiding. That idea became popular in the 1970s, pushed by a book. But the woman herself denied it, took the authors to court, and won. And there is one more problem with the Japan theory. After the Second World War, the United States gained access to Japanese military archives and interviewed prisoners and officers. Not one document mentioned Earhart, not one name, not one reference. And as for that photograph from 2017, Japanese historians found the exact same image in a book published in 1935. 2 years before Earhart disappeared, the evidence collapsed. The United States has accepted the same explanation since the first day. The Electra ran out of fuel. It went down somewhere near Howland Island. The ocean took the plane, and both people inside, to a depth of more than 4,000 meters. At that depth, in that part of the Pacific, the wreckage would be almost impossible to find. The theory is called crash and sink. Simple, direct. Supported by the data, the fuel calculations, the last radio message, the impossibility of finding the island in time. It does not require secret theories. It does not involve governments hiding information. It does not need spies or distant islands or Japanese soldiers. Just a brave woman who got lost in the sky and fell into the sea. But that complete absence, that total lack of physical proof, leaves something open, because the facts fit together. But they were never confirmed. Nobody saw the impact. Nobody found the wreckage. And in that gap, something more powerful than truth begins to grow: doubt. In 2019, the mystery reached one of the most respected explorers in the world. Robert Ballard, the man who found the Titanic, accepted the challenge. His team spent weeks mapping the ocean floor near Howland Island with the most advanced equipment available. One day, the instruments detected something strange, a rectangular metallic object on the ocean floor. For a moment, everyone believed they had found it. The excitement lasted only hours. When they analyzed it further, the object was too thin, too flexible. Not the Electra. Ballard summarized the result with one sentence. "We did everything we could. Amelia is not here, or she does not want to be found yet." More than $4 million had been spent searching the ocean near Howland in 1999 alone, scanning more than 100 square kilometers of ocean floor with high-resolution sonar. Nothing. Every new clue, no matter how small, brings millions of people back to this story. And every failure only increases the desire to keep looking. It has been almost 90 years since the Electra disappeared from radar. We have satellites, artificial intelligence, the most advanced underwater technology in history, and still, the ocean keeps its secret. Amelia Earhart wanted to prove that the world was smaller than it seemed. She wanted to wrap a line around it and come home. she never did. But in a way, she never really left either. Her story is still being told. Her name is still being searched. Her plane is still being looked for. And somewhere beneath 4,000 meters of dark Pacific water, or on a quiet island nobody has fully explored, or in an archive that nobody has thought to open yet, the answer is still waiting. The last words she ever said on the radio were these: "We must be over you, but we cannot see you. Fuel is running low." She was looking for a tiny island in an enormous ocean. She was almost there, and then she was gone. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Every week, I bring you a true story that most people have never heard.